Welcome, Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to take a closer look at subtleties and nuances on the change grid. So last time around, I walked you through each of the main layers of the change grid and, did a quick little review maybe. And I asked you guys, do you think you know enough about that particular layer of the change grid that you could share some sort of insight with your client? And we chose, I think it was 9 and 11 was the little pair we chose to kind of look at to get started. Well, I did that because I want you guys to know everything you're about to say is stuff you already know. But when you start looking at the subtleties, the nuances, slight movements from one location on the change grid to a neighboring location, you really start to go, no, this stuff all comes together in one unified, what do I want to say? I was going to say a psychological moment in time for that individual in their head, but it's also a physical moment in time. It's one little instance of attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, thoughts, feelings that will be different the moment you move in any of these directions. So that could be fun to kind of do that. Because, right now when we read change grids, you guys might be looking at this one and saying like, oh, well, you're in power about this activity and apathy about that one. And just plunking it into one of those 5 levels of tension gave you plenty of insights that you could share. And that got conversation going with a client. And so, you went on from there. Well, or maybe you were looking at these different energies and you say, well, as far as this activity is concerned, right now, you're kind of like an analytical driver. So you want to make it happen for sure. But the way you want to make it happen is by looking at the details and figuring out all the facts and figures and putting together the plans and following the plan. That's all that analytical stuff is what it's all about. And we consider that to be a great insight that can stimulate all kinds of conversations, all kinds of insights for the person realizing all that. But there's a big difference whether or not we are looking at the energies, a driven analytical driver or an analytical driver. Or what about if we're over here, halfway there? There's still a lot of opportunity for us to provide more specific detail about where someone happens to be plotting. We just have to exercise our ability to see and describe those subtleties and nuances. So that's the little game we're about to play. And so I thought I would give you guys a specific activity and give you a plotting on the change grid, and you tell me what you think is really going on based on that. So let's start with, for example, let me say you are plotting as someone whose coordinates, let's say 7, 7. So 7 and 7 on the change grid. Now, if you saw me at 7 and 7, what would you say? What's the first thing that comes to mind that you would say about that location? So Daniel or Shags? Anyone?
Well, there's something going on. They're a little bit neutral about it, but they're starting to get engaged.
Now tell me where you got
and they're on the heart line, so
yeah,
they're not so concerned about it
right.
because
Why are
everything
they
seems to be
concerned about
going according to plans.
it?
But
All right.
but something requires a little bit of attention.
Yeah. All right. So if we were to break your insights down, we could figure out which ones of these are slightly upgrid, slightly downgrid, slightly in-grid, slightly outgrid, whatever the case may be. So at 7 and 7, you're correct. They're on the heart line. So what does the heart line
And
mean?
if you'd like to know what that means,
Yeah.
I'll give you a quote from a dear friend.
I mean, bottom line, it means that there's a
Hire
balance
me and I'll
in your
tell you.
perceptions.
Hire me and I'll tell you.
There you go. I like it. So there's a
Where did
balance.
I learn that from?
Yeah, there's a balance in your perceptions of perceived ability and perceived challenge. And that balance is a good thing. So you're not feeling in any way overwhelmed by it or underwhelmed by it. You're just whelmed. And that's fine and dandy. Another layer that you kind of made reference to is you want to get something done because they're slightly outgrid. They're leaning to the outgrid side of things. And let's see, you also talked about something about figuring something out. I think there was something in there. Yeah. But that would give us a little bit of an element. And then I also think you said something along the line of that you want to get it done and get it done. Maybe there's a little bit of upgrade energy that's in there as well. Oh, Chris is joining us. Hey, everybody. So we're doing a deep dive into subtleties and nuances on the change grid. So, all right, let me go ahead and throw in what I might say about this particular location on the change grid. So let's just kind of wipe everything clean. And if someone told me that that their perceived ability to do something was a 7, the perceived challenge was a 7, I would say to them, you're inside of the green circle. That's the first thing that I want them to know, that they're in a situation where they really haven't had any need to step out there and interact with life around them. So being inside of that green circle, means something. So, and you are leaning slightly out grid of the center of the change grid. So there is a little bit of driver energy. In fact, you would be energetically the amiable driver, an amiable driver. And so you got to kind of think about what does that really means. It means that while you want to get out there and start doing something done, it's still very much smiles and cooperation and understanding, looking for the right people, the right places, appreciating where they're all coming from. So there's a very large contribution of amiability coming into play, even though you are tipping your toe and leaning in this outgrid kind of a direction. As far as intensity is concerned, you're experiencing a fifth degree intensity, or sorry, oh my goodness, 4, 5, 6, 7, a fourth degree intensity, which is a moderate level of intensity, enough to get your attention and to get you to focus a bit more on your intention. And that's where you're going to end up knowing next. So this line right here, when it comes to the engagement rings, you are moving or you have moved off center and you're in that engagement kind of a ring. Just stop. That's not true. That intention ring. So you're putting forth an intention. Now, a little bit further, you'll get engaged. But right now, it's all about this intention to do something. So moderate level of intensity, but the intensity is about intentions being formulated or made. So nothing is really happening yet. You're inside the green circle, lots of thoughts happening, lots of early decisions being considered, but that's where you're at right there. Okay, so do you guys see where I got what I got? Yay, nay? Chris,
Yeah.
Yep.
so what are we doing?
It all makes sense when we hear it.
Yeah, and so that's really it. All I'm really doing is letting my eyes, I guess, but it's more what's happening in my brain, kind of zoom up and down these layer diagrams and figuring out, well, what little tidbits could I share, and what order would they go in? So obviously, you get more fluent at it the more you do it, but you got to do it if you're
Go
ready.
back to the one we started with, which was the waves out of where the words were going on to the right side. I can't remember.
The words are going to the right side.
Yeah. Not.
Oh, inside the green circle.
Well,
Yeah.
it was when we came on. You had it up there.
Oh, did I? Well, it's in this pile somewhere. Is it this one?
Yes, that one. Okay.
Oops.
Perfect. Thanks. I got a screenshot.
Okay, good. All right.
That's all I wanted. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy
What
to
layer is
send
this
them to
called?
you. Tim's joining. Say there. Hey, Tim. We're doing deep dives into change grid locations.
I don't remember.
Now,
What's this one called?
this particular layer,
Yeah.
that's the engagement rings.
Okay.
So how
I
engagement?
know that. I'm married.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so we go from having an awareness, a well thoughtful, this is a conscious awareness, as opposed more to a kind of an automatic or a subconscious kind of an awareness
That's the
happening.
one I want to see.
Yeah, this
Thank
is
you.
actual awareness. Then we move out a little bit more. 7 would put me in intention along the heart line. Now, also notice that there are certain layers of the change grid that I didn't mention. Like I could have said that at 7 you're starting to feel a little bit of leader energy. coming into play. But I, for whatever reason, decided not to include that. Obviously, there's nothing to say about danger zones. I could say you're not in a danger zone, but there's not that. And I don't really talk about this layer so much unless I know they have some familiarity with a quadrant-based system. But even then, I would talk about this layer before I would talk about that. Now, for those of you that are listening to a recording and not seeing visuals, I would much rather look at the 16 energies than just look at the 4 different major energies at once. I mean, if anything, you heard me mention a tertiary energy. Here you're an amiable driver. So yeah. All right. I think I touched on the rest of the layers. Yeah. Well, I didn't go too basic, but yeah, could have done that as well. All right, so you get the idea. I want you to be able to kind of look at something and just quickly think about other layers and see what it is that's making that interesting to you. So let's do that.
Hey T,
Yeah.
so quick question. So with somebody plotting at 7-7, an amiable driver, would
Mhm.
one of the questions you would want to ask is, who are you waiting for, or what are you waiting for others to do? Would you explore
Mhm.
there? Because since amiable is connected, to doing things with others, could
Yeah.
that be possibly why they're there? They're holding up and waiting on something.
Right,
Well,
right,
not something,
right.
but pretty much someone.
Well, and that gets us into the next chord I was going to show you guys, because right now he's got that intention. The client's got the intention. Well, the moment I move to 8-8, now look what happens. Now, to Chris's question, now you're seeing more of the driver energy. Now they are a driven, amiable driver. And so there's more of a forward movement, and they're in engagement now instead of intention. So they have moved from having an intention to do something, and I'm saying do something because that's what happens out grid, to accomplish something, but they're stepping more into that leadership energy that we just looked at a couple of seconds ago. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They're looking at the people and looking at what's missing, what's holding me back. Now that's the next thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, I say, well, maybe in that statement alone, I've just moved a little bit analytical. And now this is where I am on the change grid. So, all right, anyway, back to you, Chris. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and I like when you move to 8-8 because that means a decision has been made to either the team
Mhm.
has moved forward with you or you're deciding to move forward whether they're going with you or not.
Yeah. And by the way, if it's just an idea that this person has and they were just getting, because we didn't specify the activity, but let's say the
Oh, okay,
activity
right.
is getting an idea prepared. Well, they did all this preparation, but they're at this point right there, as you've just observed, where now intention has moved to engagement. They may now be sharing that idea, because now they're a driven, amiable driver. More of that driver energy is coming into play. They're getting a bit more intense. Think about that too. So this intensity, now they're out there at 5th degree intensity. And so that's pretty intense. So they're out there, stepping into the light. They're speaking up. They're saying what needs to be said.
So at 7-7, they're essentially, I've got an idea and I'm getting my ducks in a row so
That's
that I
right.
can take action.
That's right. Because keep in mind, they're ever so slightly driven. So they really are going like, there might be something here that needs to be done, or an opportunity that we should be jumping on, but. And again, it's because who, I don't remember who first observed, well, they're on the heart line of power. When you're in power, you're in an information gathering mode. So you're looking for information, you're having insights, no, I don't think you're making the decision quite yet, but you certainly are formulating the decision that ultimately needs to be made. I would think it's right here as you move, or as the green circle is going through 8-8. You could go like, now I got to get out there and talk to the world. Now they're involved. So this engagement part right there is kind of like crossing that threshold out of the comfort of your personal world inside of your green circle. And now you're interacting with the world around you. Life is lived between the green circle and the red circle. So that's something else that's happening there. You guys thoughts about that? Is that, I guess one thing I also want to know is, are you finding these subtleties and nuances actually interesting and valuable?
Oh, they're very helpful.
Yeah, and all you're really using, if you think about it, is knowledge you already have. I'm not saying anything that we don't talk about in detail on each of these layers. It's when you start to go, I'm going to read through the layers and see what I might want to share. And as we just pointed out, at a certain coordinate pair, there may be less things going on. So I could say, all right, well, fine, you're a driven, amiable driver. Yes, you're on the heart line. Yeah, intensity has gone up. But to me, the most significant thing is that you've moved from intention to engagement. You've moved off to the edge of this world you find so comfortable, the world as you like to keep it. And now you're out here, making something happen. How does that feel to you? What do you think about that? And maybe, just maybe, what Chris was alluding to earlier, maybe now we really start asking those questions about what do we need, what's in the way, et cetera, which is why I said I'm starting to now hear an analytical element. And maybe, just maybe, that means that they've moved to 9 and 8, from 8-8 to 9-8, because it's in that movement in the direction of analysis, of the analytical energy, that those kinds of questions are going to be considered and ultimately answered. By the way, right there too, notice that you're on the edge between an amiable driver and an analytical driver. I'm seeing now a balance between your amiability, your concern for other people and how it all will come together. And I'm seeing now an equal interest in what might be going on analytically, what's going on this side of things as well. So there's an appreciation that is moving the intensity up. It's changing the engagement. Notice you're moving further out grid. And so your confidence is increasing. Your commitment is certainly increasing. And there you're right here at coordinates 9 and 8. You're at that area where you're going like, we need to look at some details. We need to figure a few things out. Okay, can you guys see that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so, or good. Hopefully you guys are finding this interesting. Now, if I say that this person, might as well stay on the theme we're in, actually then says, well, as I'm out here and I'm learning some more things around it, I also recognize the people I have need to be kept in a focused, energized, motivated sort of place. I don't have the time right now, the energy right now to go up here and become the rah-rah sort of person, but maybe I can just throw in a little bit of that motivational kind of energy that keeps them more focused. Again, I'm becoming a stronger, I'm becoming a stronger driver, but I'm becoming a stronger leader as far as that layer of the change grid is concerned as I move a little bit further out grid. So there I'd be at 9-9. Well, what do we think about 9-9 as a place for getting stuff done? What do you guys think?
I like it because it touches on a little bit of everything. And I think also as a leader, it's about finding what's that intrinsic motivation in others. So at 9-9, it helps you tap into the different types of energies that are available to you to help pull out what's in them to continue moving forward.
There you are. There you are. Now, if you look at even at that layer about the, pardon me, the quadrant, you're a balanced driver at that point. Why do you think being a balanced driver is a good place to be when it comes to getting things done? So build on what Chris has already shared, or add whatever you'd like to that. Why is that a good spot for getting things done?
I'm no expert in situational leadership, but the concept of it, I think, is applicable here, because here, that leader would need to have the ability to draw upon those 4 energies, depending upon that situation.
That's right.
Because like you said, they're balanced right there at 9-9.
They're absolutely balanced. They're in the middle of that outgrid quadrant. So there's something to appreciate there that is unique. It doesn't happen to, one spot to the left, or it doesn't happen one spot to the right. In fact, for a moment, move out to 10-10. Let's say you're that 9-9 place right now, a rather powerful leader. You're fully executing, or rather, sorry, you're fully engaged on the edge of executing whatever it is you're trying to work on. A lot of good stuff happening. Well, what if suddenly a new element of challenge appears in your path? It's a little bit more challenging, or something new, like I said, has come up there. Well, that's going to cause an increase. And now you're up there at a 9-10, a 9-10. So can you feel some subtleties there?
Mhm.
Versus if I said go all the way to a 10-10, or maybe you had facts that were giving you a little bit more proof of concept or proof of your position. And now you're down here at 10-8. So from this spot, you could move. Well, I mean, I can move there. I can move there. I mean, I can move anywhere, but maybe that would be more of a 10-9. So what's happening now? Now I'm actually in execution. Why do I think that there's a caution that needs to be bought there, even though I'm not in the danger zone quite yet? Anyone want to give a 10-10 or a 9-10, a 10-9? You want to give these people any sort of insight? Why is executing a potential problem?
Mhm.
Thoughts around that?
Well, I think you just got to be mindful of, where you are and what comes after that. Like if you go any bit further, that's that bull in the china shop, right? You can't
Yeah.
forget, because you're getting further away from the center and the degrees you're more intense. So it could damage relationships. Trust could be at stake. A lot of things are at stake, especially with relationships.
Mhm.
So to be mindful of it, because your driver energy is increasing in intensity.
Very good. And so as I move from here, a balanced driver, to here, what I actually am here is a driven driver. I moved into a quadrant. I'm now a driven driver. Luckily for me and the situation at hand, I'm an amiable driven driver. And that keeps those sorts of things that Tim was talking about, Chris was talking about, that kind of keeps those things in mind. They're going to keep me humble, because if I lose my amiability, where am I going to end up? I'm going to end up in a danger zone. If I'm
Yeah.
here and I lose my little amiability elements, there's no more amiable over here available for me.
So T, would you use the words, this is the first time I ever thought about this, because you said 9-9 is a balanced driver.
Yeah.
So if you go out grid, now are you an out of balance driver? Would
Well,
you
yeah, you
consider
are
that?
out of balance, absolutely, but you're
Mhm.
out of
Okay.
balance on the driver energy side of things now, right?
Right.
As I step off of this spot and go towards 10-10, I'm now in that driven driver subquadrant. And so I lost the balance. I've lost some of my, well, at that moment at least, I'm not thinking about my motivational kinds of energies. I'm not looking so much at my analytical kinds of energies. If I'm here and something else moves me, it's going to be into the danger zone. So I need that. That's a lot of words to say. I need that amiable element to keep me humble. All
the,
that
the,
stuff's good.
the impression that I get, T, is
Mm.
that at 10-10 versus 9-9, it's a bit like working on my business or working in my business.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. This person is a little maybe too driven. Although we do say 10-10 is a great place to get things done. It is a great place to get things done, but you have to have that caution put in there. You're on the edge of a danger zone. So yeah, you can get a lot done, but you better be careful. You don't step
But
on
are you stepping
toes.
on people's toes?
That's right. That's right. And so don't lose that humility. We always say that the person who's at 10-10 is looking outward. I mean, just physically put yourself at that spot. You're physically looking outward. And that means you're not noticing certain things that are behind you. And so we say you got to turn around and look at all of the people that are behind you, all the work that's been done, all the growth that has happened. It's not about you. It's about all of you. And so be careful as you get to this point that you turn and face your people instead of turn and face the outcome. Is that a good metaphor? Does that help, describe what we're hoping for here? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So now let's say we had this person, and they did well. Okay, it's all said and done. And, weeks have gone on. Let's say we find out they are now at coordinates 10 and 7. 10 and 7. So whatever they were working on here has now been accomplished. And now they're at 10 and 7 as far as that activity is concerned. So, and maybe that activity is just maintaining the success. Oh, that's right. Look at what Tim just chatted over, everyone. At 10:10, the question is, what is the cost for achieving these results? It's true because a price is about to be paid. If they step out, as long as they stay right there, then what's the cost? It's focused energy of people. It's whatever energy a true leader has to put out in order to mobilize all these people to their absolute best, because it's time to not just be engaged in doing it, it's time to execute.
It's like if you cross that line, you go from we to I.
You do.
If you cross that line.
Mhm.
That's why I think of all, you're all professional presenters on this call. Turn and face your audience. The audience is the people that are behind you. Don't turn and face your own screen. Okay, we know where the goal is, and that's the problem. I think if you turn and face the screen, it becomes all about you instead of about everyone there, the team, the success, the group, the effort, etc. So humility, I think, is metaphorically explained, or it can be described that way. Yeah, what direction are you
Is
thinking?
is 1010 a place where we typically stop listening to the good advice of people around us because we're certain of our commitments or our
Yeah, I would say you've just described the danger, because
right.
as long as I keep that amiable energy, at least in the third position, well, in the third position specifically right there, I'm good to go. I'm really good to go. But your warning would be if you step one more step out grid, and I don't care if you're moving up grid and out or down grid and out or out, you're still moving out grid. That amiable part is going to be set aside. And then, yeah, what you're describing, Daniel, is going to happen. So,
See, that 1010 reminds me of our discussion on those 4 types of power.
yeah.
Power over, power with, power to, and power within.
Mhm.
And I think that comes into play when we're at 1010 and
Yeah,
if we're at risk of going out into that danger zone.
I think so. I think so. Now, keep in mind when it comes to subtleties and nuances, you'll notice when you get into the danger zone, it looks like there's not much to really talk about. But really, this person is, let's say they're actually out here at 1111. That is a driven driver. And a driven driver, you could certainly talk about that energy. They're in power, they're on the heart line, but they're in the danger zone. I need to talk about the danger zone and what's happens to be going on there. This is when I might very well pull out the adjective map and show them all those words that you find scattered about this particular area, where it could be narcissism, it could be just becoming more of a supreme commandant emperor, whatever it happens to be on your way to the powerless point out grid.
Hey T, where would you say burnout lives? I don't know I think you've addressed this before. I
Yeah.
can't remember, but it just popped in my head.
Well, burnout because of effort being put forward is definitely happening as you move further and further out grid. And I say that simply with the understanding that moving out grid is about getting stuff done. Well, if you're burned out, you've probably been so engaged and so involved in executing, you haven't even had a chance to look at new intentions. You've just been in it, doing the work. So I think you've been out here in order to get burned out from effort being put in towards a goal. On the other hand, if burnout is really more a symptom of stress, then maybe the burnout came because you've started to wonder whether or not your perceived ability can meet the challenges that you face. So maybe movement upgrade is one of the side effects of being overwhelmed, because I guess by definition, the feeling of being overwhelmed is having not enough ability, resources, etc., to meet the expectations. So I'm basically describing an upgrade movement. Now, that would be very easy, I think, to illustrate with a client if I pulled out the dark side of the change grid, where we have that little apart from the adjective map that puts outgrid, upgrade, downgrade, and ingrid all next door to one another. With these red things. So it's easy to go from being too far outgrid to being too far upgrid, or just plain giving up. Maybe burning out also has a coping mechanism of someone just kind of just checking out altogether, which might be more of a downgrade thing, or deciding it's not worth the bother. Because again, look, they perceived ability very high, perceived challenge quite low. And so they'd be down there going like, ugh, fine. I'll just
Well, and if I may, burnout is kind of an existential crisis, right?
yep.
So it's I would see it as at the nexus of all of the danger points.
Yeah,
It's
and
where you
we are looking
really
at,
are really just out of it.
yeah, the polar opposite of the center of the change grid, or the power point is the powerless point. So this would be, I guess, I don't know, whatever direction you want to roll it. I was going to say this is the North Pole, and that's the South Pole. The North Pole is probably no more desirable than the South Pole. So that metaphor is not really working. Although I could build a case for it, that trying to live your life every moment of every day at this pole of the change could be a very dysfunctional place to be. I mean, you're not living. You're just, I mean, good for you. You've created a sublime existence in your world, but you aren't actively participating in stuff going on there. Maybe if you could get a job as the ultimate guru that everyone else takes care of so that you can stay lost in thought, maybe that would be the, you know.
Yeah, but if everybody's taking care of you, you're getting weak.
Well, that's my thought too, because I'm just kind of going like, I just don't think you do that. I just,
You're becoming mush.
so maybe the center of the change grid is the center of the earth. I don't know. Metaphorically, that might not work because that's a very hot place to be. So, lots of pressure down there. Anyway, we'll figure it all out. Okay, so going back to subtleties and nuances, you can see that even where there is apparently nothing changing, there's a whole lot of stuff changing as I'm moving between these four different energetic points. Now, the subtleties and nuances have to go further because we've never defined what is this point when it comes to the driver energy. That's not just a driven driver. That's right here. That's like the drivenest driver,
Overdriven.
drivenest,
Overdriven.
way overdriven. I mean, so we need to be able to feel that there is a difference between someone who truly plots at 12-12 and someone who's plotting at 11-11. I think I could save an 11-11. I do believe that the 12-12 is in self-destruct mode. So could they survive? Yeah, but I've only seen movies about that. So
I think at 12-12, it's no longer so much tension. It's just pure craziness.
yeah, well, I think you're right. I think you're right. Now, again, keep in mind because of that, we're talking about perception. So remember that our general practice is that whenever we see someone rate any activity on any axis as a 0 or a 12, we pause and ask ourselves, do we think that's a legitimate possibility? Is it really possible that anyone out there is truly a 12 on any activity, or that these people are facing things that are truly 12s on the challenge scale? Or are we just looking at someone's immediate emotional response to whatever the activity happens to be? So they just kind of flippantly said, I'm a 12 as far as my ability goes in challenges. It's yeah, it's tough, but I'm going to give it a 0. I mean,
Yeah, I think well, one way I see 12-12 is someone who is in fact highly skilled and is perhaps one of few that could take on the greatest of challenges.
right.
But back to that cost question, I think they wind up paying a price for that.
I think you're right. Because again, for someone at this point to actually succeed in whatever they were doing, I think they are either profoundly lucky, profoundly skilled and drilled in the use of those skills, or they're a superhero.
Let me give you a name that some of you may know, and that is Red O'Dare. Ever
Red
heard of it?
O'Dare,
Red O'Dare.
Red
Red
O'Dare.
O'Dare was a guy in the oil industry who could put out any fire, and
Yes.
that was like impossible to do. He didn't know how to do it. He could do it, and and he had the ability, and the challenge was perceived as impossible, but he could do it.
He could do it. He could do it. Well, I think when I think of the positive aspect of this powerless point, Jack Reacher comes to mind. I'm a fan of the Reacher series, and this is a guy who's been very well trained, but he doesn't even think twice. It's the surface, it seems, when he steps up against life and death situations, he willingly marches into them over and over and over again. And so he pulls away with it. Well, maybe he's as close to a superhero as a human can get. But yeah, he's that. And that now, I think we also
You know,
yes, go ahead.
so, but that brings into mind the Dunning-Kruger effect as well, right?
Yeah,
Because could you just be overestimating what you believe your abilities are
yeah,
for
but
the seemingly and for the, because 12 is impossible, right? So it's
that's
like,
right.
do you really believe that, or are you just overestimating your abilities and
Right.
not
I
considering
think
limits to technology or anything else?
yeah, maybe the perception for challenges that this would be impossible for any mortal, mere mortal. They do believe they're above and beyond. But to your point, you're right. And truly, routinely, best practice again is when we see a 12-12, we don't argue with the client about their 12-12 rating. We instead just read it as though it was an 11-11. Because if I did challenge them on the exaggerations they might be making and their perceived ability and perceived challenge, I don't think they're suddenly going to humble themselves to say, well, I'm a 3-3 then. No, I think they're going to say, well, come on, I really am I'm at least an 11, an 11.5. Can you give me an 11.5 for ability? Yeah, I can do that. Okay. And how challenging is it? Well, it's life or death. That's me. That's what I go after. That's what I train for. That's what I'm ever. And I say, yeah, but is it really impossible? Because if it was impossible, you'd fail it. And
So
they go, no, then maybe it's an 11.5 for a challenge. My point is, we don't argue with people about their perceptions. We just read it with the adjustment made. Yeah.
So when I made the comment, my definition of ability is broader than technical, and I think it also includes the will to
Yep.
do,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so when I was thinking of 12-12, and I talked about a personal sacrifice in that, in achieving that challenge, the name that came to mind for me was Dr. King.
All right. Exactly
And
right. Mhm.
and so that was the context in which I offered that comment.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because again, it's looking at this particular spot and recognizing that there may very well be situations that are true. But I would say that Dr. King did not consider what he was about to do as impossible. I believe that he saw that there was the possibility, in fact, that was built into the speech and that. So, and I think he'd probably be humble enough. So I think while we may even view him as a 12-12, if there ever was one, then maybe we're also kind of going like, nah, he's an 11-11. He wouldn't think of himself as a 12-12. He's an 11 or an 11.5 or 11 3/4. Those are all fine. But you guys get the point. You get the point.
That brings up to me somewhat of a conundrum, because we call 12-12 that point where it's a life and death issue.
Well, actually, 0-12 is life and death.
Or
12 could be life and death, but only because they're willingly stepping into it. Yeah. Does that, yeah?
So with respect to both Dr. King and Red O'Dare, both of them pursued their professions in the face of death.
Right, with a vengeance. That's it.
Right.
But this is why we have to say that when we say what is 12 on the challenge scale, we can never allow that to mean really, 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 really super duper challenging. It means impossible, and impossible is a finite thing. So impossible would mean it is totally and completely out of the realm of possibilities. So for the change grid to be complete, we have to have a spot along the scale for that to happen. That's why I'm saying no one ever faces a 12. Or if they do, woe be unto them. And I don't know that anyone is ever really a 12 when it comes to their perceived ability, because every day we are learning more, what we know is gelling more firmly, all that. So we need to make sure that we recognize that the extremes may very well exist, but there has to be a spot where the extreme is going to hold true. Is that fair enough? Again, all that should mean to all of you guys when you're reading grids is when you see a 12, whatever, 0, 12, 12, 0, anytime you see a 0 or 12, just go like, they're not a 12, they're 11.75. And they're not a 0, they're a 0.025. You know, just so you kind of go, there in the real world, there is room for growth.
Hey, T, I like the point that you made about Dr. King didn't view what he was doing as a 12. And the reason I say that because I like the other side of it, how we may view somebody to be at 12,
We do.
but he thought it was possible, right? So he
All
literally
right.
believed that this could be achieved, you know, galvanizing not just the people,
That's right.
but consensus in government and getting these parts to work together. So he saw it as a possibility, a high level of
That's right.
challenge, yes, but not
That's
necessarily
right.
impossible.
That's right. Chris is still on there. Chris, aren't you the possibilitarian?
I am, no matter how dark things are or appear to be,
That's
raise
right.
your sights to see the possibilities, always see them, for they are always there. Yes.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so I think that's where it really was, because if it was truly impossible, then no, it couldn't happen. So again, we are dealing with perceptions when we get out here. Now, there's another flip side of this I think we really have to discuss. Remember that that every superhero has to have something in order to demonstrate their heroicism. So what does every superhero have to face?
Their
Kryptonite?
weakness or antagonist.
Oh, definitely an antagonist. We need supervillains,
Mhm.
right? So when
Hmm.
you get up to this point, you could be the superhero that's doing all the right things in all the right way, and you're facing the near impossible, and putting yourself to the ultimate kind of test to make that all happen. You're doing it by choice. Up here, it'd be happening to you. Up in stress, it happens to you. Here, you're deliberately, consciously, intentionally, there. A grand choice has been made. But keep in mind that this could also be the domain of the supervillain if their motives have no amiability to them. And again, here they're the driven driver. They want an outcome, at what cost? So yeah, thoughts about that this could be the superhero or the supervillain. Yeah.
I think it could be a bumbling superhero,
Oh yeah.
perhaps Bizarro.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. If we want to make them, an unfortunate superhero, or the fumbling, bumbling one, well, where would they be there? They might perceive themselves as having great level of ability to do something, but in reality, their ability is significantly less. And because of that, they're stepping into situations where they're ill prepared to meet them. And so we can suddenly have a little comedy involved in our supervillain. They like what's the one where he's always say $1 million, with Mike, what's his name? With Mini Me, what's that whole series?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, Austin
Austin
Powers.
Powers.
It's Austin Powers. Austin Powers here, you think Austin Power thinks of himself as being the most evil individual who has ever lived, to tell the tale. And what do the viewers view of him? He's kind of like, somehow he's been successful, but he really is just kind of like a bit of a bumbling fool. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, there's plenty of bumbling fools out there that still accomplish things. All right. So again, subtleties and nuances on the change grid. I wanted to show you now the counterbalance to all this. What happens if you're plotting at coordinates 12 and 8? 12 and 8. Look, let's just zoom in there. Can you see how many lines are coming together right there? So you're nowhere and you're at all these places all at once. It's like, this is a very complex place.
Make a good movie title.
It could be, could it?
Everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, you're everything. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They should make a movie about that. I'll bet it would win awards. Okay. So here, what's going on? You're a 12 on ability and an 8 on challenge. Anyone want to throw out anything you might say to that person?
Do you want to do this or do you want to pass it along?
Yeah, right. Well, because this is the thing. Look what's happening energetically. The first thing that was noticed was they are this point would be, I'm going to say it's a driven analytical driver. I'm trying to figure out the if I wanted to pull in the actual energy here, they are technically a driver. We got that. They're analytical. They're leaning towards the outside seeing things. So that spot right there would have another driver element to it. But they also moved down grid. So there's an analytical part to what's going on as well. Do you guys see all those just at this spot?
Excellent. Driven analytical driver. Is
A
that right?
driven, well, see, a driven analytical driver is the spot we use right here.
Yeah.
So we need to intensify, we need to add more of an analytical energy to it and a half a dose of more driver energy to end up there. Yeah, right. If you guys see, graphically how we're moving around, to get from here to here, I have to move up 1 point in my perceived ability, and that would move me further down grid by a half a point, if you will, because I'm not all the way down here. I'm halfway down, but simultaneously halfway driver. So take me from here to there. And I'm pointing this out because I know it's a very complex place to be. Luckily, I can't remember the last time I've had to tell someone about being at that location, but this is where subtleties and nuances are really being put to the test. Similarly, if we were down here at coordinates 12 for ability and 4 for challenge, you still see this great accumulation of divisions, if you will, about things that are happening on the change grid. So, yeah. Okay. Are you guys finding this interesting or not so much? What's happening here? Yeah. We have
Yes.
Good. We have a similar situation when we're plotting up here. We're plotting on here. Do you guys see why, rather than try to read this, I automatically change the 12 to an 11? Because see what happens if I'm here, back where we were talking about, and I go, well, what's really screwing things up, honestly, is this belief that their ability is a 12. So is that really a valid, legitimate assessment of their ability? Or am I hearing them give an immediate emotional response to it and they gave themselves a 12? So am I going to bother trying to read through this hodgepodge? Or am I going to go like, I know for certain there is no such thing as a 12. I know for certain it doesn't exist. So if I'm going to read this spot, I'm going to read it as though it actually existed and they were exemplifying it. Do you guys think that would be accurate, or do you think that would be like missing the mark?
I think they probably would not resonate with it.
Then
In
I
which
would
case
hope,
you get the answer that you're looking for.
right? Because if I'm just describing them as someone on the perception layer alone, if I'm describing them as someone who has a perceived ability of a 12, that means you have all of the knowledge there is to have. There is nothing left to learn. You have perfected every single skill to the point where there is no room at all for any improvements to ever occur. And you have exercised this knowledge and this skill so effectively, so consistently, so many times that it is now something that an additional experience is just going to be a repeat of one you've already had before.
And see,
That's
what it
what
also,
that's what a 12 means for ability. Do you think this person is going to own that or say, well, if that's what a 12 is, then no,
right,
I'm
because
not 12.
there would be no need for us having this conversation if that's the case.
That's
Like,
right.
because what can I do for you if you
What can I
have it
do?
all?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. You tell, maybe I'll lead you through the path of self-discovery just to be the facilitator, but I don't know that I've got anything I can teach you. By definition, if you truly are a 12, there is nothing left that I can teach you. You already know everything. You've perfected every skill. There's no room for improvement. There's no experience you haven't already had and successfully managed. So again, I could do that reading with a client, but when I do that reading with a client, what do you think they're likely to say? Absolutely right. Or are they likely to say, well, no, 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 maybe then I'm an 11. And so I think they're going to automatically self-correct when I challenge them on it anyway. And if I'm going to do that, well, then why don't I just read the 11 as I think they're true? Because now here the reading. Well, you really have the lion's share of the ability it is that this situation at hand requires. In fact, if you just look at the numbers, you rated your ability as a 12. I'm going to use their number and rated the challenge as only an 8. That means you have 1.5 times the ability that the challenge at hand requires. You are more than prepared to do this. And so if you'll notice, you're right on that edge between engagement and execution. You can just go take care of this. Now, I will point out that energetically, you're more now of an analytical driver. In fact, you're a driven analytical driver, but there's that analytical element in that secondary position. So you're figuring it out, or you've already figured it out. You know how to do it. You know how to proceed. And when it comes to the role that you're serving it around it, while you could continue to lead it, this is also where you're on the edge of becoming a strong advocator for it. So it feels to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a question that's existing now for you about whether you want to continue to run this show or whether you'd like to find someone else to hand it off to. You're very low in power. You're very low. In fact, you're even low in terms of engagement, even though you're on the brink of execution. So what are we going to do about this point? All right, so can you guys see where I got everything I said from? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, again, we'd have to look at the activity. If the activity is running this growth thing, because again, well, we never spelled it out, but obviously the movements we made along the change grid, this person is making something happen. They had to get some people involved, solve some little questions. Then ultimately they moved back up here to really deploy it. And we've tried to, help them, not deal with the negative aspects of being a 10-10. Maybe they just stayed as a 9-9. Their ability went up to do it. It became easier. They even formalized it a little bit more, and now they're here. Okay, so do you feel like they should be hanging on or letting go? What should they be preparing to do?
I think it depends on, did they get there as a result of the
Yep.
necessity for what it is, or are they just moving away from the leadership role?
Well, that's it. As far as this situation is concerned, that's exactly what I want to explore with them. Are they done with it, even though it needs to continue? Do they have to be the one that's continuing to do that? Because the moment they fall down here, and now they're more into
Isn't that what I said at the beginning? Are you going to do this? You're going to give it up.
yeah, right. Well, you're going to do that. This is what's happening. Because out here, what would we say to them? You just have to give it up. If there really are a 12 for ability, you really just need, because you're going to end up resenting them very soon as as you've mastered it, perceived ability. This area right here on the change grid is the domain of resentment and frustration. feeling like somehow or another you got suckered into doing something, you don't feel like doing it. Yes, you're very good at it, but it's boring and routine now. Blah, why do they not see my talent? Nah, 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 nah. You know, but
We're
I'm
not getting the rewards they promised.
yeah, exactly. You know, it's all fine. Another day at the office. They're going to end up downgraded into apathy sooner or later. And that frustration could, we would hope that that frustration is an energy that's going to help them get re-engaged and what's going on, but they're slipping out of engagement back into intentions, but not intentions for themselves. Usually it's intentions for other people. Let them do it. They'll take care of it. I'm not going to worry about it, blah, blah, blah. And they end up moving further and further downgrade.
See, is that where that's where the threshold of delegation is at, right?
Somewhere, yeah. The thresholds
Mhm.
obviously float above the change grid as we know it because they're in constant motion, as does the heart line. So the heart line, the threshold of activation, the threshold of delegation are kind of like a layer into their own, and they're all three in motion. Well, the heart line doesn't move, it's the heart line, but the other two are constantly moving, upgrade, downgrade, whatever direction they happen
You
to
know
go.
what? Just here's a quote that Blanchard says that I love. He says the opposite of trust is control. So
Mm,
if it's technically that if you're around the threshold of delegation and you're
yep,
not giving it up, that means you are leaning more into controlling, still
that's
controlling
right.
versus establishing a culture or ecosystem of trust
Right,
around
exactly.
you.
Which gets to Shag's question to pose to him. Do you really want to keep doing this? You know, is there
Right.
really no one you can develop to take it over or is already positioned to take it over? You know, or can it be automated? Maybe this is something that doesn't need to be done by a human. It just needs to be formalized to the point that it can be programmed and, you know, do whatever it is on its own. You know, it felt to me as we were doing this, it was a business development kind of a example we were working our way through. So, can it do it on its own? Can I delegate it to someone else? Because I'm going to move downgrade. Why do I know for certain I'm going to move downgrade?
That's the
Because
natural flow. That's the
that's the
natural
natural
flow
flow,
yep.
right? Over time, my ability is going to continue to, if it doesn't improve, it just gets more locked in, it gets more solidified, and that's going to make the perceived challenge start to scoot down. So unless another challenge presents itself, which is a totally different activity, I'm going to keep moving down grid, moving down grid, moving down grid, and I got to let go of it. So ideally, how do we say that? The threshold of the threshold of delegation tends to live in power apathy. That's a good spot for it to be. It could be all the way down into apathy before someone lets go of something or delegates the authority for someone to do something. They have to be so painfully bored by it before they'll let go of it. Ideally, where should they be on the change grid where when they delegate? Where should the threshold of delegation and threshold of activation live in the most functional, productive human we can think of?
On the edges of power.
They are coincidental with a heart line.
All right, right. Yep.
Yeah. So right there in power, right in the middle. Why do I need to move all the way up here to hit my threshold to do something I figured out I needed to do long ago? It's because my threshold of activation deviates from my heart line. That represents something. Do you guys remember? What is the degree to which my thresholds deviate from the heart line tell me about me? The degree to which your
Dysfunction.
yes, exactly. It represents the level of dysfunction that I'm still dealing with. So why am I waiting for external things to drive me upgrade to get something done? Why don't I do it because I'm intentional and did it deliberately? How come I can't just do it while I'm on the heart line? Well, I can. And even Chickson and High's work on flow implies that it does happen because flow is the exact center of the change grid. You know, we've certainly done a lot to expand on what flow actually means when you look at the dynamics of the change grid. That's fine. But flow is where you're actually getting stuff done and it feels effortless. So by definition, your threshold of activation has to be on top of their heart line in order for that flow state to really be achieved. I'm not saying things aren't moving if your thresholds upgrade a little bit, but it's not a very streamlined trip, if you will. You know, maybe this is the river meandering on its way to wherever you're trying to get it to go. So that deviation represents dysfunction. Dysfunction just says things are not operating as optimally as they could. Maybe that's about systems. Maybe that's just about your mind. You know, there's a barrier of some sort, real or imagined, that's in your way. Got to help you get rid of it. And similarly, why don't people delegate when they first decide to delegate? Where should delegation ideally occur? It should occur while you're on the threshold. While you're on the threshold, we need so and so doing this and so doing that, and make that decision. Do it. Don't hang on to it. Our example right now is someone who's at 11 and 7. No, that's 11 and 8. And so at 11 and 8, I'm still hanging on to it. I'm losing my interest. Look where I'm plotting, but I'm losing it. One little movement. Think about this, if the perceived level of challenge goes down by 1 point and now I'm a 7, do you notice I just moved into power apathy? If my ability increased 1, which just makes me feel even more over prepared for it, now I'm at this point where all kinds of bad stuff is going to start happening. Still outside of the red circle. This is still a dangerous place to be. All right, I know I've just said a lot of words, but
Yeah. Hey T, I just had a aha moment. I love to hear from the circle on this, because as we were talking about delegation, and when you're resisting delegation, for me, I just had a conversation with a group of leaders with a client earlier this week. And for me, when they say, I don't have enough time, for me, there's a correlation to control. Like,
That's
you're
right.
not willing to delegate efficiently throughout your team to help them develop, help your team members grow in their development level so that they can take on some of those responsibilities. But you kind of like the idea of the control of a leader, and you don't want to delegate. So therefore,
Right.
you're not having enough time.
So I'd want, yeah, you're creating your own, you're being creative,
Yeah.
create the obstacle about what's going on. But you have to go like, why aren't you letting go? Now, so that's where the obstacle identification comes into play along as the path walk goes. So there are obstacles, real or imagined, that are in the way. They might give us a real one. They might say, there is no one on the team that's ready to manage this. Now, again, you'd have to build your case about why your unique skill set still means we got to keep you in play, even though you're dropping down grid. But is that really the case? It could be, but more often than not, I think we're dealing with obstacles of the mind. So, Tim, did you say it's because of trust? They don't
Yeah.
trust someone?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think it's a number of things, but I think trust is probably one of the dominant responses to that, because leaders tend to delegate to folks they do trust to the extent that they overwhelm that individual, and send messages to the members of the team in terms of whether or not the leader trusts them. But I think that delegation question Chris poses has a lot to do with that leader's trust of the team members.
That's right. That's right.
The conversation here is reminding me that, of our recent acting commandant of the Marine Corps just had
Oh,
a
yeah.
heart attack,
Yep. Yep.
right? Because too much was put on him, too much was delegated to him, and it obviously, we think, overwhelmed him. But too often we delegate outcome responsibilities without management authority.
There you go. In fact, I think in pride-based leadership, do we talk about rah-rah? That in order for
Yes.
someone to succeed, you have to give them the rah-rah. And I think it was, they have to have the responsibility, the authority necessary to carry it out, the resources, and some sort of accountability. And if we can't give them the full rah-rah, then this game ain't going to play right. So if I never give them the authority, but I give them the responsibility, what's the chances of success happening? I'm
Wow.
holding you accountable, but you have no authority. Oh, by the way, no resources either. So,
Well, and to the extent that many do, they say, well, I hold the authority to make sure that things work right. Well, then you're not really doing what you're saying you're doing.
that's right.
You're holding that person in check and making them feel, and making them come to you for permission. The power permission, the power, the permission to perform is what has to go with.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so if you guys have found this interesting, there is another layer of questions I'd like to throw at you next time around. And it has a little bit more to do about, rather than looking at the intersections that we have on the change grid, let's instead look at the intersections of the lines that are not like right there. That's not any coordinate pair unless someone said, I'm an 8.5 for my ability and the challenge is a 4.9. So you know what I mean? What does this moment feel like as someone transitions between these? So we're going to be looking at those kind of transitions that occur as someone's at it. All right, Tim just chatted over everyone a link. Okay, great, excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so with that, so we'll be done for today. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You all have a great weekend.